Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now in this video, we are going to understand about the optional class in Java. Okay, so this is one of the most important topics in the Java programming language, in the Java library, and it is very crucial to understand this because it is very much important if you want to build the APIs in a more better way, and if you want to avoid the infamous null pointer exception problem that happens at runtime mostly, and it's very frustrating to when it does come, right? So here we will discuss about it in detail, and we will see where to use it, how to use it, and where not to use it. So both aspects we will see here. So first thing is optional is coming from the java.util package. Okay, so you can create optional. Now what exactly is optional? First let's see. So optional is basically a class which is used as a container for a value. Okay, that value can be of integer type, a long string, or it can be a list of collection of any objects. Okay, but that value should be only single value. It only holds a single value. Multi values are not, it's not a data structure. Okay, it's just a value container, so it can hold only one value at a time. Okay, so suppose I want to create a value of type string. Okay, it uses generics for it, so it knows what kind of values it is getting, and we can say optional of type string. Now we can create optional using two ways. Okay, so first thing is both are static method. So one is optional of. Okay, now this of method creates the, we pass a value. Suppose I pass Java. Okay, here. Now one thing to note that this of method, if you see its signature, returns an optional given the non-null value. So it checks for the non-null, it checks that value should be non-null. Okay, if you pass a null value, then it will throw null pointer exception. So first thing first, if you are 100% sure, not even less than that, if you're 100% sure that your value you're getting from somewhere or you're putting into something, into the optional, is non-null, is never going to be null, then you should, then it is recommended to use of method, right? So here you can say creating optional with non-null values, right? So this is one of the way to create optional. Okay, and you can simply print the value optional string. So if you run it, you will get simply like optional Java. But since it is a value container, so it has the value. Now we want to extract that value, right? So we will see how to extract value also. But before that, what about null values? Okay, because sometimes it may be the case, here we are just hard coding the values just to understand it, right? But maybe you are building the API and you are calling some service or you're calling some method from some other layers of your application. So there, if the null value get passed, what should be the approach then? Can we create an optional which can handle the null values? So yes, there is a way. We'll understand that. So there is, let's create another optional of string. We will this time say optional name. Okay, and we'll just say optional of, and there is one thing called of nullable. Okay, now here if you pass null, it's perfectly fine, it can accept a null value. Okay, it will not give you a null pointer exception. So here if you simply pass optional name, and if you print it, you get an optional dot empty. Now it doesn't throw a null, so that is one good thing about it. It will give an optional dot empty. Optional dot empty implies there is no value. So optional basically tells us that I am a container which can have two possibilities. Either I have a value or I don't have a value. If it has a value, it gives you the value. If it doesn't have a value, it gives you optional.empty. So these are the two ways to operate on optional. Now let's see how to extract the value from it. So again, there are multiple ways to do this. So one way is that you want that if a value is present, then okay, fine, I will use it. That is very simpler case to do, right? But the things start to get complex, or things start to get there has to be some choice that if the value is not there, then what should be the approach? Now there are two approaches to this problem. One is, if the value is not there, you provide a default value, and if the value is not there, then you throw an exception. Okay, so we will see both approach. Let's first discuss the default value, that how can you deal with the default value. So default values in optional. Okay, now suppose I want to see that in the optional name I am currently passing null. So null means there is no value. Okay, it treats null as no value. We can have a method optional name dot, the first method or that optional class got was get method. Okay, now in the current scenario, if you are working in some big enterprise setup, then this get method is highly discouraged. Okay, so at least I have seen that this get is not encouraged, and so you should not use this get method. Okay, though this is present, this was the present when the optional was introduced in the Java 8, but later on in the later JDK versions, the new methods got introduced which are more suitable to use. What is the problem with this? Let's see. If a value is present, returns the value. That's absolutely perfect. Otherwise, throws no such element exception. Now here comes the whole thing, that if the optional has the value, it gives the value, perfectly fine. But if it doesn't have a value, it throws an exception. So basically, it doesn't give us a chance to handle such cases. Maybe we want to provide a default value rather than throwing exception. So in that case, it doesn't do well. Okay, so that is highly discouraged. Okay, so I would say never use it. Okay, so for this is the first thing that I have highlighted here, never use it. Okay, now the second approach is to use optional name dot or else. Okay, now here or else, in the or else you can pass a value which is again non-null. So don't pass a null, because already or else means if the value is not present, then the else part will run. So again you pass null, then it doesn't make sense, right? So if the value is null, you are saying you can pass any other value, or you can just, for here I'm just passing no value. Okay, so this is what I'm passing, and let's introduce some value. Okay, so this is how we can get it, value. Now here, if you run the code, you will get no value, because this is the default value that you have passed. You can pass any default value. I have here passed no values, so to indicate that currently no value is there. So no value if is there means the value here is most probably null, right? Now if I pass something like I pass Java again here, I'm passing some value, so the value will get printed. So you can see here the value is getting printed here, right? So this is one way to deal with the option values. Now there is one more way I will tell you. Let's reuse this variable for now. Optional name dot or else get. Now this is another function which is used for returning a default value in case the value is not present in the optional. But rather than just taking directly a value, it takes a supplier. So supplier is basically a type of lambda expression where it doesn't take any parameter, but it returns something. Okay, so we just can write this, and we can just return a string saying no value. Okay, and now if I print value here, or let's say here we can say default value. So if I run again here, okay, we'll get in Java again the value because we have the value here. But in case if I don't have the null, if I pass null, then it will give default value, right? Now you will say that what is the difference between or else and or else get if both are working the same. Now there is a very significant difference. In fact, your application's performance can be affected severely if you don't just go with any of them. Okay, you just can't go with any of them. Both are that much important to understand. So let's see. Now this or else method is a basically you can say eager method. Now eager method means whether it's here we are passing the values, right, in this case and in this case also. But if you are calling some web service or some other method for fetching the values, even though the value will be present in the optional, this or else method will compute that. Okay, but this or else get method will only get the default value when the optional value don't have the actual, will be empty. So to understand that, let's create a method first. Public static, I will create a string and say, let's say get default value. Okay, I will say inside default value method, inside get default value. Okay, and then I will simply return default value. Okay, this is a very simple method, right? So rather than writing hard coding it, we will fetch get default value, and here also let's call the method get default value. Okay, what it's saying? Okay, it's saying to replace with method reference. So you can use this also. Static method reference you can use. Okay, or let's stick to lambda expression for some time, right, to better understand it. We are getting a default value while calling this method. Now what should be the ideal case? Ideally what we expect is if this optional name has some value, suppose it has some value, right? So it has a value IntelliJ Java, something like that I put. Okay, it has some value, so you expect it to print these values here, right, to get the value inside the value variable and print it. You don't, you think that okay, this method will not get called, this method will not get called, because since the value is not present in the, since the value is present in the optional, right? So first let's run this and let's see. Now here comes the real catch. We are running this value, right, and the value is getting printed IntelliJ idea, which is our actual value. But you see here something else is also getting printed, which is inside get default value, and this is coming because this method has been run. Who ran this method? This or else ran this method. So that's what I was trying to say. Every time you are someone is trying to use this or else, this will call the service, call the method to get the default value. Okay, it will compute the default value, you can say, whether the optional has the value in it or doesn't have the value. In smaller scale it doesn't matter. You are writing a command line application, it doesn't matter much, you will not see anything. But if you can imagine that on a larger scales, there is a need to continuously fetch the value because of so many hundreds of thousands of requests you are getting maybe. And in that case, if this or else runs again and again, and to fetch this default value from some other web service or from your own method, which is, and getting this default value requires some computation, so that can cost you a lot. So nowadays everyone is running their applications on cloud, So the cloud bills can get more bigger if this happens, right? So it impacts to that level. So that's the reason when you should use or else and when you should use all else get. For I can say 99% of the time, or else get method is used. There is hardly some here or there some few cases maybe where or else is used, but what I have seen is this or else get is the most used method. So this is the most preferred one. Okay, most preferred in case of default value. Okay, so if you are approaching your application where you want to handle the absence of value in the optional, use by supplying some default value, use or else get method. Okay, now let's come to exception thing. You don't have any default value, you want to throw an exception. So exception handling is also provided. Exception handling in optional. So this part we have already seen when we were building our APIs in the backend series, right? We have seen that in lot of places. Okay, and we have also developed a centralized way to handle the exception to show the proper error messages, right? So of course you know it, but again let me remind you of that. So we'll use something like val optional name dot or else, and this is throw. Okay, and you can here provide new runtime exception, no value present. Okay, so this is how we handle the exception, and you can just print the value. So if you run the method, you will currently get the value, but in case of null, when there is no value, so you will get an exception, right? Now how to handle these exceptions, I've already discussed with you in the backend series, so you can go to those backend series and see, because these things we are using when we are building the applications. Okay, there this class is mostly used. Now there are other aspects of optional also. So we have created one new optional. Now there are multiple methods here actually which I wanted to discuss. One is if you go here, you see if there is if present or else, and there is one more method if present. Okay, and is empty is present. Now is present will give you boolean if the value or it will give you true if the value is present. It will give you false if the value is not present, and opposite of it is the empty. Okay, so you can apply whenever you are getting an optional result. You can simply say some value optional dot is present, or if it is present, then some value optional. Okay, I am using the get here despite saying never use it. The reason behind is simple, because we have already checked whether the value is present or not. Okay, so even the usage of get is though discouraged, but in a rare to rare situation it is used. So this is one of the situation that we can use it. But this if else thing is making the code more verbose also. So there is one more better approach to write this thing. So we can say some value optional dot if present. So if the value is present, we have to pass a consumer. Now consumer is a type of interface which has a method, is a type of functional interface basically, which has one method, abstract method, which takes an argument but doesn't return anything. Okay, return type is void. So we are taking some argument. Now here argument type will be of the value type. Okay, so here optional is storing string value, right? So here this will also be of type string. If you hover over it, you will see it is a string. Okay, so we'll say just print a string. So if I run this method again, okay, let me pass here some value. Okay, and let run again so that exception is not thrown. Okay, so I'm getting developer, right? Now there is one more approach to this if present or else. What this does, it takes two parameters. One is consumer, second is runnable. Now both are interfaces, okay, abstract functional interfaces. Now for consumer, we have seen that we can do simply like this one, right? For runnable, it has abstract method which does not take anything, means which does not take any parameter, and it does not return any parameter. So we just can pass here a no value present. Okay, so if any value is present, then this consumer part, the first argument will run. If the value is not present, then this will run. Okay, so let's run it. Okay, so it runs. In case this value becomes null, okay, then this expression will not run, but this expression will run, but the second part of it will run. Okay, no value present. So I hope you have understood it. Okay, and now let's understand about the last few things, which is to use map filter. Okay, let's understand now some more methods. Okay, so some value optional. Now you can apply conditions on this optional also, and it will be applied on the value inside the optional. Okay, so you can say filter will filter out the value, will check if the value satisfies the given condition. So I am saying e dot, it should start with the capital D. Okay, and if it starts with D, then I want it to map, I want to transform this value basically from developer to, I want to append Java. Okay, so it will become Java developer, right? And then now in case the value we have passed here doesn't starts with D, so this map will get empty optional. So in that case, I want to return or else get some developer. Now if I it will provide me with some value, so let's say some value, and I will print this some value, right? So if I run this, I get a Java developer, right? But if I change it to small d, and if I run, then I get some developer. Okay, so these are the methods that can be operated on the optional values, and you can work on them like this also, right? So I hope you have got an idea of how to work with optional. Now before we end this video, few important things: when to use optional and when not to use optional. So use optional only as a return type. So this should be very much crystal clear whenever you are developing any APIs or you are writing the code in your application and using optional. Always use optional as a return type. That was actually the intention. Okay, if you don't use it as a parameter to the method. Okay, the reason is that optional is a class, and a class can be used as a reference type also, right? If you use, and a reference type can have a value as null, so you can basically this optional, if you specify the optional of type, suppose anything integer also, you can make this optional as null also, right? Now this is valid, but this can cause null pointer exceptions if somebody, rather than passing an optional, passes null in by using that method. Okay, so it is very important that you are using optional only as a return type. Now also don't use optional in entities and DTOs. Now what I mean here, whenever you are writing a field or you are declaring getter setter for them, don't use optional there. Just use the value as it is, because optional should not be used here, because that can lead to various problems. Conventional or default way, the way we are using entities DTOs and the methods inside them to fetch our fields, whether using getters or setters. That convention we should follow. If you use there, then there can be a problem of serialization, because we often use Jackson library to deal with the JSON objects when we are building our RESTful web services, right? So there, if you use optional or in the interaction with the database, that can very much throw exceptions. Okay, so this is the most recommended thing that I want to say. These are the only two things that I want to say. There are many do's and don'ts for the optional, but these are one of them. These are the two important things. Okay, so just take care of it, and you will be able to use the optional safely. Okay, and optional are very much useful for handling the nulls and to avoid null pointer exception at runtime. Okay, so yeah, use them wherever you find that you should not, the value can be a null. So in case a method is returning a value, you can wrap it around the optional, and whenever the user of that method, whoever is calling the method, gets to know that okay, this method returns an optional, so it is the duty of that caller that if something is optional, then it means that it will have the value or it will not have the value. So it needs to check and use accordingly, right? So it gives that kind of crystal clear indication to the caller of the method also. So these are some of the things regarding optionals. I hope you have understood the concept of optionals and like the video. So subscribe to the channel for more such videos. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye bye.